The year was 2014. The gaming industry was loud. We were obsessed with the chaos of DayZ and Rust, where survival was measured in bullets and the environment was merely a backdrop for our violence. And then, in the midst of this cacophony, the lights went out. There were no zombies. There were no other players to grief you. There was no glory. There was only the wind, the snow, and the geomagnetic disaster that stripped humanity of its power, leaving us shivering in the dark. The long dark arrived not with a bang, but with a whisper, a cold, sharp intake of breath that froze in the air and refused to dissipate. It has been 11 years since Hinterland Studio first invited us to the quiet apocalypse of Great Bear Island. 11 years of episodic updates, of overhauls and tweaks. In the time it takes for a child to grow into an adult, this game has remained steadfast and unyielding, like a glacier carving its way through a mountain. We live in an industry that prizes the new above all else, where games are consumed, digested, and discarded in the span of a weekend to make room for the next content mill. To survive for a decade is rare. To remain relevant, to remain revered, is almost unheard of. But the Long Dark is not like other games. It does not chase trends, and it does not respect your time in the way modern design demands. It demands patience. It demands a recalibration of what you consider to be gameplay. And perhaps that is why I find myself returning to it, year after year, like a pilgrim returning to a shrine. I started this journey back in 2015, when the game was a fraction of what it is today. It was rougher then, emptier, but the soul was already there. Since then, it has become a tradition. Every year, when the real world begins to gray, when the temperature drops and the days grow short, I feel the pull. It is a strange instinct, isn't it? To seek comfort in a simulation of freezing to death. To escape the stresses of modern life by inhabiting a world where finding a can of peaches feels like winning the lottery, and where a single mistake, a wrong turn in a blizzard, a forgotten bedroll, a greedy decision to harvest a deer carcass for 10 minutes too long can erase hours of progress. As we stand here, 11 years later, the game is approaching its own twilight. The final episode of the Wintermute story mode is so close we can almost grasp it. It feels like the end of an era. The final winter is not just a narrative conceit, it is the state of the game itself. It has reached its maturity. It has grown from a simple sandbox into a sprawling, complex simulation of survival that rivals anything in the medium. And while the survival mode, the true heart of the game, will likely continue to receive small updates, it is clear that the resources and the creative energy are beginning to shift toward what comes next. So, this is the perfect time to look back, to analyze not just what the game is, but what it represents. To ask why, in an industry obsessed with more content, more players, more microtransactions, a game about less has managed to endure. We return to Great Bear Island because it is honest. It does not try to sell you a power fantasy. It does not try to trick you into spending money. It simply presents you with a problem. You are cold and you are hungry, and asks you to solve it. Hinterland Studio looked at the arms race of the 8th console generation and chose to walk away. They chose not to simulate the world as it is, but as it feels. The visual identity of the Long Dark is not a limitation. It is a manifesto. It is a painted void. It is a watercolor dream of the apocalypse that refuses to age because it was never trying to be real in the first place. This stylized aesthetic is the primary reason the game has survived the decade with its dignity intact. It creates an atmosphere that is uniquely, beautifully hostile. That is the core friction of the art direction. The world is breathtakingly gorgeous. The way the sun hits the snow at dawn, casting long, bruised purple shadows across the ice. The way the sky turns a burning radioactive orange during the golden hour before sunset. The the way the moonlight turns the frozen lake into a sheet of silver. It is a world you want to live in. It is a world that wants you dead. This cognitive dissonance is the heartbeat of the experience. You stop to admire the view from the top of Timberwolf Mountain, breathless at the sheer majesty of the digital canvas, and in that moment of appreciation, your body temperature drops, your calories burn, and the cold creeps into your bones. The beauty is a lure. It is a siren song designed to make you forget, just for a second, that you are a small, warm thing in a universe that has gone cold. And then there is the aurora. When the geomagnetic storm flares, the painted void changes. The sky tears open in ribbons of green and violet, pulsating with an electric hum that you can feel in your teeth. The lights flicker on, street lamps buzzing with ghostly remnant power, radios crackling with the static of a dead civilization. It is the only time the world feels truly alive in the traditional sense, but it is a wrong kind of life. The soundscape of Great Bear Island is defined by what is missing. There is no traffic. There is no hum of distant cities. There is no music for the most part, only the occasional mournful swell of a cello or a piano that underscores your isolation. The silence is heavy. It is a physical weight that presses down on you. And into that silence, Hinterland pours the most meticulous audio engineering in the survival genre. The wind is not just a background track. It is a character. It has a voice. You learn to listen to the wind the way you listen to a conversation. You learn to hear the shift in pitch that signals a drop in temperature. You learn the difference between the wind tearing through the trees, shelter is near, and the wind howling over open ice. You are exposed. Then there are the crows. In a game without a minimap, without a radar, without floating objective markers, the crows are your GPS. Their cawing is a signal flare. If you see them circling, you know there is a carcass nearby, a potential source of food or a feather for crafting arrows. The wildlife audio is designed to trigger a primal fear response. The bark of a wolf is not a generic sound effect. It is a directional warning. The heavy, wet breathing of a bear is a sound that stops your heart before you even see the animal. This creates a psychological landscape that is just as important as the physical one. The art and the audio work in tandem to create a feeling of absolute, crushing isolation. The art style captures a world that is not just frozen, but preserved. The interiors of the cabins, the abandoned gas stations, the ominously echoing hydro dam. They are cluttered with the detritus of a life that ended in an instant. The stylized art softens the tragedy of these scenes, giving them a melancholy warmth. In the end, the graphics of The Long Dark are not about what you see. They are about how you feel. And what you feel, standing on the edge of Mystery Lake as the sun dips below the horizon and the first stars begin to prick the canvas of the night sky, is a profound, terrifying, wonderful smallness. You are a speck of paint in a vast, white void, and it is beautiful. In its survival mode, the pure, unadulterated heart of the experience, there is no script. There are no NPCs to give you quests. There is no overarching plot to save the world, because the world is already dead, and it cannot be saved. There is only you, the cold, and the unyielding passage of time. The Long Dark is not a simulation of conquering nature. It is a simulation of dying slowly. This is the core friction that defines the experience. It is the mechanics of frailty. When you wake up in the snow on Great Bear Island, you are not a blank slate hero waiting to level up. You are a biological machine that is rapidly breaking down. You are a leaky vessel of calories and heat, and the universe is doing everything in its power to reach equilibrium, which, in your case, means frozen. The game communicates this frailty through its 4 pillars: cold, hunger, thirst, and fatigue. In any other game, these would be annoyances. Here, managing them is the gameplay. Let's talk about the cold. In most titles, cold is a debuff. It slows you down, maybe ticks away a little health. In the long dark, the cold is the antagonist. It is a stalking predator that is more dangerous than any wolf or bear. It has a presence. It has a weight. The game tracks the ambient temperature, the wind chill, the wetness, and the insulation value of every single article of clothing you are wearing. In the long dark, you wear wool socks because cotton kills. The game asks you to care about the material of your gloves. It asks you to worry about whether your scarf is wet, because if you fall through the ice, a constant, terrifying possibility in the coastal regions, your clothes freeze. They stop insulating you. They become heavy anchors dragging you toward hypothermia. You find yourself in a cave, shivering next to a pathetic fire, realizing with a sinking heart that you are arguably the most pathetic protagonist in the history of video games. That is the magic, the vulnerability. Consider the act of lighting a fire. In most games, fire is aesthetic. It is comfort. In the long dark, lighting a fire is a negotiation with probability. You need a starter, tinder, and fuel. Even if you have all of these things, you have a percentage chance of success. You strike the match. You watch the bar fill. You listen to the sound of the flame trying to catch the tinder. And sometimes, it fails. The match flickers and dies. You have lost the match. You have lost the tinder. But most importantly, you have lost time. Time is the true currency of the long dark. Every action takes time, and time is calories burned. Time is body heat lost. And while you have your head buried in a carcass, a blizzard might roll in. You might freeze to death with a backpack full of raw meat because you got greedy with your time. This brings us to the food. You have a store of 2,500 calories. Sprinting burns them. Chopping wood burns them. Sleeping burns them. If you run out, your condition, your actual life bar, starts to tick down. The long dark gives you a skill tree, but it's for things like carcass harvesting or fire starting. You don't get cool new moves, you just get slightly less incompetent at not dying. You don't become a superhero, you become a competent survivor. And that competence is the only reward you get. The first few days of a run are the purest distillation of the survival experience. They are defined by a desperate, clawing need to simply stabilize. This is the scramble. Once you have found a coat, once you have boiled enough water, once you have established a base of operations, the game shifts. You are no longer surviving, you are living. This transition is subtle, but it is vital. You fall into a routine. You wake up, you check the weather, you eat your venison steak, you repair your clothes, you go out to check your snares. There is a deep, meditative satisfaction in this routine. It is the satisfaction of competence. You have tamed the chaos. You have carved a small, warm space out for yourself. But the genius of the long dark's emergent narrative is that this safety is an illusion. The game is a master of complacency. It lulls you into a false sense of security with a week of sunny weather and a porch full of meat. You start to take risks. You start to get cocky. I can make it to the next region before sundown. I don't need to bring the heavy sleeping bag. The next house is not that far away. And that's when fatal mistakes happen, and you have to start all over again. In the early game, you are a bottom feeder. You throw rocks at rabbits. You scavenge carcasses left by wolves, hoping they don't come back. You are weak. But the long dark allows you to change your place in the food chain. Crafting the bow is a turning point. Finding the rifle is a revolution. Suddenly, the wolves that terrified you are resources. They are walking coats. They are a source of food. The bear is not a monster. It is a bedroll waiting to be made. This shift is empowering, but it is also dangerous. The game tempts you into thinking you have conquered nature because you have a gun. But bullets are finite. The rifle jams. The wind makes your aim sway. The game gives you power, but it never gives you certainty. There is no "you win" screen. There is no helicopter coming to save you. The only end to the long dark is death. You play until you make a mistake. Maybe you get confident. Maybe you think you know the map better than you do. Maybe you think you can take that wolf with your bow. Maybe you just forget your bedroll. One mistake spirals into a cascade of failure. You get bitten by the wolf, so you have to bandage the wound and disinfect it. But the attack tore your clothes, so now your freezing protection is lower. You are losing heat faster. You need to find shelter, but you are injured, so you can't sprint. You stumble through the snow, your vision blurring, the cold seeping in, and you fade into the long dark. Save file deleted. Permadeath. This brutality gives every moment weight. It makes the mechanics of Frailty matter. If you could just respawn, the cold wouldn't be scary, it would be an inconvenience. But because death is final, the cold is terrifying. It forces you to play methodically, to plan, to respect the systems. There is a profound nobility in this futility. It mirrors the human condition. We are all terminal. We are all going to fade into the long dark eventually. But we still build houses. We still try to stay warm. But the game never lets you forget how fragile that warmth is. The affliction system is the game's way of reminding you that you are made of meat. You don't just lose HP, you get specific, debilitating injuries. You can sprain an ankle. You can sprain a wrist. You can get food poisoning. You can get intestinal parasites from eating predator meat. You can get cabin fever from staying inside too long, a psychological mechanic that forces you out into the danger. The long dark proves that annoyance, or rather, resistance, is essential for satisfaction. If lighting a fire was easy, we wouldn't care about it. Because it is hard, because it is fickle, the roaring blaze of a wood stove feels like a victory. 11 years later, these mechanics have been refined, balanced, and expanded, but the core remains unchanged. The stories we tell about the long dark are not about what the game did to us. They are about what we did to survive. They are about the wolf that almost ended a 100-day run. They are about the night we spent trapped in a fishing hut during a blizzard, reading a skill book by the light of a pot-bellied stove. They are about the silence and the cold and the will to keep going. And that is a story worth retelling, every single winter. In the modern open-world game, the act of seeing has been outsourced to the user interface. We do not look at the road, we look at the minimap in the bottom corner. We do not look at the destination, we look at the glowing white waypoint hovering in the sky. The modern game is terrified that you might get lost, because if you get lost, you might get bored. And if you get bored, you might stop playing. The long dark breaks this contract. There is no "you are here" marker on the map. The ability to sketch your surroundings with a piece of charcoal was a mercy granted years later. Before that, you navigated by memory alone, orienting yourself solely by the landmarks you could see before the fog rolled in. This omission is perhaps the single most audacious design choice Hinterland made. By hiding your current location, they fundamentally altered the relationship between the player and the environment. You cannot simply glance at a menu to orient yourself. You have to look at the world. You have to look at the shape of the mountain in the distance. You have to look at the way the power lines cut through the forest. You have to look for the landmarks that anchor the horizon. Navigation, in the long dark, is a cognitive skill, a cartography of the mind. We need to talk about the weather again, but this time, not as a mechanic of temperature, but as a mechanic of blindness. When a blizzard rolls in, the visibility drops to 0. The landmarks you use to triangulate your position are erased. The world becomes a swirling vortex of white noise. You lose your sense of direction almost instantly. This is where the game shifts from survival simulation to psychological horror. You know that shelter is close. You know the camp office is maybe 200 yards to the east. But which way is east? The sun is gone. The wind is screaming so loud you can't hear your own footsteps. You start to walk in what you think is a straight line. You stumble through the snow, your condition ticking down, your character muttering about the cold, and you realize you are going to die. Not because you were attacked, not because you starved, but because you lost your way. I've played this game for a decade. I know most of the maps better than I know the streets of my own hometown. I have internalized their geography. And yet, every winter, I have at least one moment where the blizzard rolls in, and I am suddenly, completely, hopelessly lost. It is a humbling experience. It strips away your confidence. It reminds you that your knowledge is fragile, dependent entirely on your ability to see. In the long dark, a building is salvation. The sight of the trapper's homestead rising out of the snow after a long, freezing trek is not just a graphical asset rendering in, it is an emotional event. It means warmth. It means safety. It means you get to live another day. There is no fast travel. You have to walk. You have to trudge. You have to feel the distance. This gives the world scale. Great Bear Island is not actually that big, geographically speaking, compared to the sprawling maps of modern Ubisoft titles, but it feels enormous. It feels enormous because you have to earn every inch of it. Crossing from the Quonset garage to the lighthouse in Desolation Point is a journey. It requires planning. It requires supplies. It requires a mental map of where the wolf packs usually spawn. Because you cannot simply teleport, you become acutely aware of the transition zones, the crumbling highway, the winding river, the cave systems that link the regions. These are not loading screens. They are airlocks. They serve to isolate the regions, making each one feel like a distinct chapter in your survival story. Navigation in the long dark is a skill curve. In your first year, you are the tourist. You are lost, stumbling, dying in the snow because you turned left instead of right. In your fifth year, you are the local. You know the shortcuts. You know where the bear sleeps. You can navigate from the camp office to the dam in a blizzard purely by the slope of the ground under your feet. And now, 11 years later, for those of us who return every winter, we are the ghosts of Great Bear Island. We haunt these hills. We do not need the charcoal anymore. We have drawn the map in our minds, etched it into our memory with every frozen death and every close call. Ultimately, the absence of a location marker is a statement of respect. The developers trust you. They trust you to look. They trust you to think. They trust you to find your own way. And in a medium that increasingly treats its players like children who must be led by the hand from set piece to set piece, that trust is the warmest thing on the island. You play as Will Mackenzie, a pilot with a heavy heart and a heavier plane, and later as Dr. Astrid Greenwood, his estranged ex-wife carrying a mysterious hard case. When the lights go out and the plane goes down, the setup is classic. Separation. Survival. It is the stuff of 1,000 novels and 100 films. The production value is immediately apparent. The voice acting is superb. The cinematics are stylish, retaining the painterly aesthetic of the game while injecting a cinematic flair. The music swells at the right moments. The writing is earnest, if occasionally melodramatic. But the moment you step out of the crash site and into the gameplay loop of Episode 1, you feel the intrusion. In survival mode, you explore because you need to. You enter a house because you are freezing, and you need curtains to tear into bandages. Your movement is dictated by your needs. In Wintermute, your movement is dictated by the UI. A marker appears on your screen. Go to the town of Milton. Talk to the Gray Mother. You meet an elderly blind woman sitting in a rocking chair in a silent house, rifle across her lap. She is a striking figure, a symbol of the old world refusing to die. But to advance the plot, to get the information you need to find Astrid, you must gain her trust. And how do you gain trust in a video game? Fetch quests. Lots of fetch quests. And then there is the issue of death. In survival mode, death is the end. It is the erasure of your history. That permanence is what gives the cold its teeth. In Wintermute, death is a minor inconvenience. If a wolf tears your throat out, you reload a checkpoint from 5 minutes ago. The removal of permadeath fundamentally alters the emotional landscape of the game. You can play recklessly. You can sprint through blizzards because you know that if you freeze, the game will just let you try again. The stakes, which feel so impossibly high in the sandbox, feel artificial here. You are watching a movie where you know the hero makes it to the sequel. This dissonance extends to the game's antagonists. As we've established, the Long Dark already has the perfect villain: nature, the cold, the indifference of the universe. These are terrifying because they cannot be reasoned with, and they cannot be defeated. Wintermute decides that this isn't enough. It introduces human villains. It introduces the convicts from Black Rock Penitentiary. It introduces Mathis, a guy with a gun and a bad attitude. Why? Why do we need a man with a gun to create tension in a world where the air itself hurts your face? The presence of human antagonists shifts the genre from man versus nature to man versus man. And frankly, The Long Dark is not a good shooter. Wintermute is a decent adventure game wrapped in the skin of a survival simulation. It serves as an excellent, if overlong, tutorial for the mechanics. It gives context to the world, but it is not The Long Dark. "11 years. In the video game industry, that is not a lifespan, it is a geologic epoch. When The Long Dark first launched, we were different people. Younger, perhaps more optimistic, certainly less tired. And just as we have aged, so too has the game. The arrival of Episode 5 will mark the closing of a circle. It will fulfill the promise made all those years ago on Kickstarter. And while I have my reservations about the story mode, I cannot help but feel a sense of finality about its conclusion. It is the end of an obligation. It is the developers finally putting down the pen after writing a novel that took a decade to finish." Hinterland has made it clear that their eyes are turning toward the horizon. The resources of the studio are shifting, and the sequel, Blackfrost, The Long Dark 2, is supposedly coming in 2026. We know its form. It is a direct continuation, yet the foundations have changed. It is moving to the industrial city of Harmont, and it is adding co-op multiplayer. It will ask us how far we will go to survive for others. It is chasing the very trends the Long Dark so successfully ignored, perhaps to survive in a new, crowded gaming landscape. We are living in the final winter of The Long Dark as we know it. The game is feature complete, or nearly so, and as I look at this sprawling, messy, beautiful, hostile simulation of the end of the world, I am struck by how singular it remains. There is no other game that captures the specific, crushing melancholy of being the last person on Earth. There is no other game that understands the silence. The Long Dark is not a forever game. It is an antidote, and because of that, it has carved out a permanent space in our library. We play it to feel the weight of existence. As we approach March 2026, we have to ask, was it perfect? Yes, to me it was, because it has a soul. A soul is a hard thing to quantify in code. You cannot put it on a spec sheet, but you can feel it. You feel it when you are walking down the tracks in the forlorn muskeg, and the music kicks in, mournful and slow. You feel it when you are huddled in a cave, watching a blizzard rage outside, knowing that you are safe for now, but only for now. It is a game made by people who love the cold. It is a game made by people who understand that nature is not a backdrop, but a force. It is a game that respects your intelligence enough to let you die, and respects your time enough to let you figure out why. The legacy of The Long Dark will be the millions of quiet, unscripted deaths experienced by players in the sandbox. It will be the stories we wrote ourselves. It will be the memory of the time you tried to summit Timberwolf Mountain and made it back to the hut with 1% condition and broken ribs. It will be the memory of the time you got lost in Pleasant Valley and froze to death 10 feet from a farmhouse because you couldn't see it in the whiteout. I will play episode 5. I will see how it ends. But then, I will do what I always do. I will wait for winter. I will wait for the real snow to fall. And then, I will boot up survival mode. I will choose a random spawn. I will wake up shivering in the dark with nothing but the clothes on my back and a will to live. I will walk into the white. I will fade into the long dark, and I will love every cold, miserable second of it. The lights are out, the wind is howling, and I am ready to begin again. An exploration like this, a deep dive into the soul of a game, requires a certain level of patience. These videos are slow, methodical journeys that take a while to make, and because of that, you can expect only one years later retrospection from me each month. Liking the video and subscribing to the channel are the best ways to support my work. Thank you for watching.